Hi everyone and welcome to episode 8 of the Shenmue Talk Series. In this episode I'm going to talk about Shenmue 4 and how I think this fourth installment of the series can be modernized and become closer to the gaming experiences that we have currently in the present day, but while at the same time maintain the Shenmue essence that made the fans fall in love with the series since its original release more than 20 years ago. But before I carry on, I just want to say that the thoughts and ideas that I'm going to share throughout this episode do not reflect the general opinion of the Shenmue community and its fans. Some of you may agree with my opinions while some may not, and that's fine, so bear that in mind while watching this video. In that regard, if you want to know more about this topic and the general opinion of the Shenmue community and its fans, I suggest you check the discussion forums at shenmuedojo.com. I'll provide some links in the description below. So with that being said, let's get started. I'm going to start this episode by defining the most important aspects that I think should be focused on in Shenmue 4. And develop upon them my thoughts and ideas on how to make it more modern while maintaining its core essence intact. The aspects that I think should be focused upon Shenmue 4 are mainly the story, character development and gameplay. These are the pillars that make up the Shenmue experience that the fans love and want to retain until the completion of the series. The story of Shenmue has always been one of its most important elements, and one of the main reasons why Shenmue fans never gave up on the series, mainly because of that amazing and magical cliffhanger at the end of Shenmue 2 that kept Shenmue fans wanting for more for almost 20 years. And in that regard, Shenmue 3 did not deliver what fans had been expecting for such a long time. Sure, there were certainly moments in Shenmue 3 that pushed the story forward, and when they happened, they felt rather special, but overall, they were not enough to please most fans of the series. The fact that it had passed such a long time between the end of Shenmue 2 and the beginning of Shenmue 3 made it mandatory for the third game of the series to have a big revelation that made the story move forward. But the main focus of Shenmue 3's story was on Ryo's relationship with Shenmue and the improvement of his martial arts skills, and not so much on the main plot. This is due to the fact that Shenmue is an episodic series composed of multiple chapters, and Shenmue 3's story happened to focus on these two main chapters that we see highlighted in this image that shows the concept art chapters for Virtua Fighter RPG that would later become Shenmue. But Shenmue 3's story seems to be building up the series for the beginning of some big revelations and the answer to its most burning questions. This is why I believe one of the main focuses in Shenmue 4 should be, and I'm almost certain it will be, the main story. But in order for that to happen, I believe that Shenmue must improve in some key areas that I think are essential to deliver a good and engaging story. To start off, I believe that the team needs a good scriptwriter, one that understands the narrative needed to deliver good lines of dialogue and that understands in general the overall plot and the characters that take part in it, as well as the cultural, historical and mythological aspects contained within its world. The dialogue within the main story's narrative should be delivered in a natural and appropriate way, leaving the traditional awkward and stilted dialogue that is commonly associated with the series to fit in side quests, random encounters and world exploration. I believe that in this way Shenmue 4's narrative and voice acting can become on par with what is expected from a modern game, and at the same time maintain some of its original charm that the series is known for. Another improvement that should be implemented in Shenmue 4, if the overall budget for the game could allow for it, are the facial expressions. This improvement will allow characters to express more realistic emotions, making Shenmue 4's story more engaging and immersive, which can make the game more attractive to a newer and wider audience. A good example of this improvement would be something similar to a game such as Detroit Become Human. Its good narrative, voice acting and realistic facial expressions kept me engaged from beginning to end. One possible option to this improvement is the recently released MetaHuman software from Epic Games that allows developers to create characters with realistic facial expressions in a much faster and more accessible way than other traditional methods. But in my opinion, this option is only viable if Shenmue 4's characters can maintain the original artistic design of Shenmue 3. It wouldn't make any sense to make the Shenmue characters realistic, especially now that the Shenmue anime is currently in development and due to be released next year. Another element that I believe is absolutely crucial and that Yu Suzuki should maintain within Shenmue is the original story that he envisioned for the series, especially its mystical and mythological elements, which make Shenmue much more than just your typical revenge story. Personally, these were for me one of the main reasons why I fell in love with the series. They are what gives Shenmue its distinct flavor and what sets it apart from other games of the genre. I also believe that to make Shenmue 4's story more captivating, that it is necessary to bring back that sense of mystery and wonder that was very present in the original Shenmue. I think that one factor that can contribute to achieve this feeling is having Ryo encounter objects that are spread within the game world, that he will need to use to solve puzzles that will allow him to progress the story, something similar to the puzzle that Ryo had to solve in the original Shenmue in order to gain access to the hidden basement in the Azuki Dojo, where he found the Phoenix Mirror. So, to sum it up, these are the improvements that I think should be applied in Shenmue 4's story in order for the series to become closer to a modern gaming experience while retaining its original style. Character development is one of the most fundamental aspects of Shenmue, and also one of the reasons why fans love the series so much. Shenmue has a unique cast of characters that have their own personalities, backgrounds, and daily routines. This is one of the factors that contribute to making these characters believable. Another factor is the way they are presented and how they interact with the main protagonist Ryo throughout the course of the games. This creates a real sense of bonding, not just between the characters themselves but also with the player. Something that still astonishes me until this day, especially considering that this was achieved more than 20 years ago, and that in my opinion has only been successfully replicated in recent years in titles such as Detroit Become Human and The Last of Us. The character development in Shenmue 3, in my opinion, was somewhat of a mixed bag. Personally, it felt to me that the cast of characters in Bailu Village was more memorable and consistent when compared to the ones in the city of Niao. This also applies to Ryo's relationship and interactions with Shenmue in both locations. Ryo's interactions and conversations with Shenmue in Bailu Village were amazing, being for me one of the best and most memorable moments in the entire series, as in Yahoo there were also some memorable ones, but they fell short when compared with the ones in Bailu Village. The interactions between both characters in Yahoo were less consistent when compared with the ones in Bailu Village. The same is also applied to the side characters in both locations. In Bailu Village, Ryu's interactions with the side characters were more developed and consistent when compared to the ones in Yahoo. Overall, this gave me the impression that the development of Yahoo and its characters was rushed by the developers of the game. Knowing that Yu Suzuki is a perfectionist and considering the fact that the character development is one of the strongest features of the previous titles makes me believe that ISNET was pressured by the publisher Deep Silver to launch the game sooner than Yu Suzuki wanted. This resulted in a less polished experience for the player in Yahoo when compared to the one in Bailu Village. For Shenmue 4, I believe that the best approach for character development should be to have at least 2 or 3 new well-developed characters, besides those of the main story from the previous titles. Ryo should have at least 3 to 4 meaningful interactions throughout the game with these new characters, in order for the player to feel that a bond has been created between them. I believe that in this way they can leave a memorable impression on the player after he finishes the game, resulting in a positive and more profound gaming experience. For the main characters, it will be very important to have deep emotional and dramatic moments between them. This is absolutely essential in order to create a long-lasting impression that will remain in the player's memory even after completing the game for a long time. This will create a bond between new players and the characters of the game, and strengthen it with long-time fans of the series. A great example from one of the previous titles is the story of Shu Ying and Ziming. Both brother and sister became orphans when they were still children. Their parents were killed, and because of this tragic event, their fates went in different directions, with Ziming seeking to avenge their deaths by joining the criminal organization of the Chiyomin, and Shu Ying who sought inner peace in the religious temple of Manmo, where she later became its headmaster. This unfinished emotional story made a lasting and memorable impression on fans of the series, who still want to see its conclusion in one of the future games of the series. Let us hope we can see it in Shenmue 4. In my opinion, this is the area that needs less improvement, apart from the characters' facial expressions, as I mentioned before, in order to captivate new players. Character development has always been one of the strongest features of the Shenmue series, and with the feedback given by fans and reviewers on Shenmue 3, I'm sure Yu Suzuki will make the effort to ensure that Shenmue 4 will deliver a solid and memorable cast of characters. So, to sum it up, this is what I believe needs to be addressed in regards to Shenmue 4's character development. As a Shenmue fan, I've always enjoyed its gameplay and genuinely felt that each game of the series improved after the other. Yes, even Shenmue 3's gameplay in many areas felt like a natural evolution over the first 2 games of the series, but not in all of them. Some, unfortunately, felt like a step back, being the most evident the lack of throw moves in the combat system and the lack of branching QTE sequences. Many fans considered Shenmue 3's combat to be also a step back on the series, and at first I was also one of them. This was because I had been accustomed to the Virtua Fighter combat style of the first two games for almost 20 years. But what I realized was the more I played Shenmue 3's combat, the more I enjoyed it. The fact that the moves had some input lag made me change my style and the way I fought. I began to focus more on my opponent and his fighting style. Soon I realized that Shenmue 3's combat is all about timing and anticipating your opponent's moves. The first times I fought in Shenmue 3, I took the same approach as I did in the first two games of the series, by starting on the offensive, attacking my opponents relentlessly to finish the fight quickly. Playing Shenmue 3 on challenge mode for the first time, I soon realized that I had to change my offensive style to a more defensive one, especially with stronger opponents. But using the guard button can only get you so far, because your guard gets easily broken after taking some hits. This is where the most essential mechanic in Shenmue 3's combat comes into play, and that is the dodge mechanic. By dodging with the analog stick, instead of spamming the button on the controller, the fighting in Shenmue 3 became more three-dimensional, resulting in a much more realistic fighting system than its predecessors. This is also helped by the improved camera angles that allow the player to have a better overall view of the fighting area. By learning how Shenmue 3's combat system worked, I soon changed the difficulty from challenge mode into nightmare mode. Even though Shenmue 3's combat system is level based and in nightmare mode opponents were able to do and take much more damage, that didn't discourage me at all. Instead, I was having fun more than ever before with Shenmue 3's combat system. Yes, there were times I would feel frustrated with Shenmue 3's level-based combat system by losing a fight knowing that I had hit my opponent multiple times more than he had hit me. But the fun for me was in improving my skills by training and mastering Shenmue 3's combat system. By correctly timing my dodging and my striking, I was able to pull out powerful counterattacks, enabling me to defeat much stronger opponents. But even though I love Shenmue 3's combat system, I still think it needs to be improved, especially the mechanic where we select an opponent with the right analog stick, a feature that I absolutely hate because it doesn't feel natural at all. In my opinion, there should be no need to select a specific opponent. This jeopardizes the player when fighting multiple opponents. The other obvious improvement to Shenmue 4's combat system should be the return of throw moves. Throw moves have always been a staple of Shenmue's combat system. For me, they are absolutely essential, especially considering that they are a very effective way of disturbing an onslaught of multiple opponents, giving the player time to breathe and rethink his strategy in case he's losing control of a fight. But even loving Shenmue 3's combat system, I honestly don't think that today's casual gamers will put in the effort in mastering it by playing it the way it should be played. In that regard, as much as I hate to say it, the way the combat system was introduced by the developers in Shenmue 3 was a critical mistake on their behalf, especially considering that this combat system was completely new to both longtime fans and new players alike. I believe that if they had explained how this combat system fundamentally worked, both longtime fans and new players alike would have perceived it in a completely different way and probably wouldn't have categorized it in just being a button masher. Now, the big question in my opinion is, Would new players invest enough time in the combat system to actually get to praise it? Maybe, but I believe that if one of the main objectives of Shenmue 4 is to reach a wider audience, then the developers must find a way to either reduce the input lag enough in order for the player to feel a more immediate response, while still being able to perform combos, or they would have to change the combat to a real-time input system. This would either mean that the combat would have to return to the original Virtua Fighter system with directional button inputs, or that the combos would have to change to simultaneous button presses instead of being sequential like in Shenmue 3. Either way, if the team can improve and refine Shenmue 3's combat system for Shenmue 4 and add in the throw moves, I believe that the game will have a solid combat system that could attract new players into the franchise. Another gameplay element that can be improved for Shenmue 4, and that is directly connected with Shenmue 3's combat system, is the training minigames. I love the training minigames in Shenmue 3 and feel that they are a natural evolution over the previous games of the series. Being able to spar with the monks in local dojos or with several martial artists around the world of Shenmue 3 is amazing. The fact that we can also fight with single or multiple opponents to practice our skills is also an added bonus. The only downside, in my opinion, to this feature is the fact that we only gain experience when sparring and not from real fights as well. I believe that this should be addressed when developing Shenmue 4's leveling system. As for the martial arts training minigames, I love every single one of them and feel that they were well implemented in the game. Personally, my favorite is the 1-inch punch minigame. Timing the punches correctly and seeing them get closer and closer to the wooden dummy as Rio levels up is very rewarding, especially when you hit them with the perfect timing and listen to its blasting sound. Although I love the training minigames in Shenmue 3 and feel that they are a natural evolution over the previous games of the series, I believe that they are also rather simplistic for the enjoyment of a modern gamer. I would love for this feature to carry on onto Shenmue 4, but in order for them to become more modern, the minigames will need to be a bit more complex and challenging, while at the same time more fun. A good example of a modern minigame that is more complex, challenging and fun is the bamboo cutting minigame in Ghost of Tsushima. In it, the player has to press a sequence of buttons rapidly in the correct order to cut the bamboo branches with the katana. The minigame is composed of 3 stages, with each new stage increasing the sequence of buttons to press. This ends up making the minigame both more complex and more challenging, which also ends up making it more fun. I believe that this minigame could fit perfectly in Shenmue 4 by simply changing it into a similar martial arts exercise, like the breaking of tiles or wooden boards with the hands. In fact, in the Virtua Fighter CG Portrait series from the Sega Saturn era, there are pictures of Akira Yuki performing this martial arts exercise, which can indicate that Yu Suzuki might have had plans of making it a future gameplay feature for Virtua Fighter RPG that later became Shenmue. I believe that this could be a really fun and challenging minigame to implement in Shenmue 4, making it more complex and more modern than the ones in Shenmue 3. Another great example that we can pick up from Ghost of Tsushima is when its main protagonist Jin Sakai relaxes in the hot springs he finds when exploring the island of Tsushima. When Jin Sakai relaxes in a hot spring, he increases his maximum health and meditates about his life, his friends and loved ones, or even his enemies. Let us take a look at how this feature works.
uncle is free, we'll eat his favorite meal. Vegetables sweetened with mirin on a bed of rice.
In Shenmue, Ryo has also meditated in the Azuki Dojo, making this gameplay feature also a part of the Shenmue lore, which in this case would also fit perfectly into Shenmue 4's gameplay. The following video montage that I've created is an example that shows how easily this idea could be implemented in Shenmue 4.
Dear Ryo, those who follow the path of a warrior must be ready to die in order to stand by their convictions. Live for one's convictions. Die for one's convictions. That is how I lived my life. Ryo, it is up to you to discover your path and follow it through.
If this idea were to be implemented in Shenmue 4, I believe that Ryo could meditate in several places, like a temple, a calm place of natural beauty, and of course in a dojo. This gameplay feature could also be used to make the time pass while Ryo waits for a certain event to unfold. Since Ryo becomes more relaxed and more focused by meditating, this feature could also help the player in QTE sequences by giving him more time to react to the button prompts that will appear on the screen for him to press. This gameplay feature will also allow Yu Suzuki to give more depth to Ryo's character and create a stronger bond between him and the player, while at the same time not having to spend a portion of the overall budget in creating cutscenes to produce the same effect. Another interesting gameplay feature that could also be implemented in Shenmue 4 is having Ryo practice Tai Chi in a rhythm-based minigame with a random QTE sequence that changed the tone of the music according to the player's performance. Something similar to what happens during the woodcutting minigame in Shenmue 3. During the exercise, the player would fill in Ryo's chi energy that he could later use in combat to perform more powerful moves that would deal more damage to Ryo's opponents. Here is an image of the possible interface of the Tai Chi minigame that I've created as an example with the button prompts of the QTE sequence showing on the right and the Tai Chi energy vessel on the left. The more button sequences the player hits correctly, the more the Tai Chi energy vessel will fill. Each time the player performs a super powerful move in combat, a portion of the Chi energy in the vessel is drained, until it becomes empty, with Ryo having then to practice more Tai Chi to fill it up again.
I didn't know you could attack with Tai Chi.
It's Chen-style Tai Chi. Most styles begin with force and develop into softness. However, Tai Chi begins with softness and develops into force. Softness doesn't mean there is no force. You cannot be complete until you attain both.
I think I understand.
I'm John Min. And you are?
Hazuki.
And what is...
So, these were just some examples of how elements of Shenmue lore can be implemented and used as minigames for Shenmue 4, making it a little bit more modern while still retaining its core essence intact. The next gameplay element of Shenmue 3 that I am going to talk about is one of my personal favorites, and also one of the most controversial amongst Shenmue fans, and that is Shenmue 3's stamina system. For me, this gameplay feature was a welcome addition to the series, because I've always enjoyed this type of gameplay element in other RPGs, and in my opinion made the world of Shenmue 3 feel much more alive. The fact that Ryo now has to eat to maintain his health makes the player interact with the game world much more than in previous titles, because now Ryo has to work to gain money so that he can buy food from the local vendors, and by doing so he can carry on improving his martial arts skills that are necessary to defeat the adversaries that he comes across in his journey. But this gameplay element didn't sit well amongst some Shenmue fans and new players alike. Their major complaint is that Ryo's health is also his stamina, which is constantly drained by every activity that he performs, forcing the player to constantly engage in the game's side activities to be able to carry on and progress the game. As a Shenmue fan, I must say that this didn't bother me at all, but I can also understand why some may not enjoy it, especially for those that like to play more mainstream open world games that give the player the freedom to do what they want in its world. But I also understand why Yu Suzuki made the game this way. In my opinion, his intention was to make the player engage in every activity that the world of Shenmue 3 had to offer, and by doing so, the player would end up having a much more enjoyable gaming experience. But most players don't like being told what to do, especially in a video game. They want to enjoy it in their own way, without feeling forced to do what they don't want. That's why I believe that for Shenmue 4, Ryo must have a separate health and stamina bar. Ryo's stamina should deplete gradually according to the side activities that he performs, or in the fights that he engages in. The stamina should regenerate slowly, but if the player wants to replenish it more quickly, Ryo must eat a meal or drink an energy drink. For this, I believe it is essential to bring back Ryo's drinking animation from the previous titles.
Ooh. Ah, good.
As for Ryo's health, it should work in the same way as it did in Shenmue 3. If Ryo takes damage in a fight, he must eat, sleep, or buy medicine from the local drugstore. I believe that in this way, longtime fans and new players alike will end up enjoying all of the activities that Shenmue 4 will have to offer, more freely without feeling forced to engage in side activities when they don't want to. The next topic that I want to talk about is Shenmue 3's economic system and how it should be improved in Shenmue 4. Shenmue 3's economic system is well-rounded because it connects all of the activities in the game, but at the same time, in my opinion, it is also unbalanced because most of the items that the player wants to collect are highly overpriced. This forces the player to grind in the game for a long time, which for most ends up turning into a boring and tedious gaming experience. In my opinion, Shenmue 4's economic system should be well-rounded and well-balanced, without forcing the player to grind on side activities for long periods of time. The player should also feel rewarded when working, exploring, or when achieving something significant within the game world. I believe that in this way the player will have a better and more enjoyable gaming experience throughout his playthrough of Shenmue 4. Another thing that I think should carry on from Shenmue 3 to Shenmue 4 are the woodcutting, fishing and herb gathering side activities, and if possible, create some new ones to add in a bit more variety into the game. So, to sum it up, these are the improvements that in my opinion should be made in Shenmue 4's gameplay. In this chapter, I'm going to share my personal opinion as a fan and as a gamer in regards to the development budget of Shenmue 4 and what I believe are the possibilities and the options for it to become a reality. First of all, I think that Yu Suzuki and his net should carry with what they have developed in Shenmue 3 as a base to develop Shenmue 4. In my opinion, it would be unwise and certainly unprofitable to try and build up Shenmue 4 from scratch, even if its budget could allow for it. By developing Shenmue 4 with the foundation that they have created with Shenmue 3, and by improving all the aspects and areas that were less polished, I believe that they can develop a much better game, consolidating Shenmue 4 as one of the best games in the series, not just amongst longtime fans, but also the gaming community as well, which in sum will result in a greater profit. In my opinion, the budget for Shenmue 4 should be applied in the following order of importance. First and most important of all is the story, followed by character development and then the gameplay. In case there is a less favorable scenario in regards to the overall budget, not allowing to develop a full-sized Shenmue game, then I believe that the best option should be for the developers to create Shenmue 4 in several parts, like an episodic series where in each part they would develop just one area, like Shenmue 3's Bailu Village, for example, and making it fully voiced and fully interactable with story, investigation, puzzle solving, QTE sequences, training and combat. Since every Shenmue game is usually composed of 3 explorable areas, then Shenmue 4 would be composed of 3 episodes, with each episode being played in a different area. I believe that this is a possible and viable scenario, since ISNET is a small studio. This scenario would allow for the team to work with a smaller budget, and they could develop each episode gradually and in less time, and without being overloaded with work in developing a full-sized game. This could also mean that overall they could turn in a greater profit and at the same time take a smaller risk. The overall cost could also be reduced by the publisher if they would sell the game in only 2 formats, being one a digital version of the game and the other a collector's edition, since usually these tend to sell out completely. Whatever the case, I believe that Shenmue 4 will become a reality and that Yu Suzuki and ISNET will improve upon the game. I also believe that today we are in a far greater position of having another Shenmue game than before when the 2015 Kickstarter was announced. Shenmue 3 may not have been the perfect Shenmue game that we all wanted, and with almost 20 years of expectations, it was never going to be that game. But the most important is that it kept the Shenmue essence alive and has created the foundation for the series to carry on. Although some may think that they have wasted their lives playing Shenmue 3, there are much more that keep on sharing every day their wonderful experience with the game. There has never been a greater time to be a Shenmue fan. Since its release, Shenmue 3 has sold out several collector's editions and exclusive soundtracks and vinyls. Sega has sold out its Shenmue merch and is carrying on launching new Shenmue-related products. The Shenmue series has also recently been adapted into an anime series due to its launch in the next year by Crunchyroll, the largest anime broadcasting platform around the world, which will certainly bring new fans to the series, and its community of fans keeps on promoting and pushing the series forward more than ever before. But let us not rest on our laurels and carry on fighting to make Shenmue 4 a reality. With that being said, we have reached the end of yet another Shenmue Talk Series episode. I hope you have enjoyed it and keep on the Shenmue spirit alive. See you next time.